I think if you look at the lines of work, I kind of break it out into three verticals or three buckets. The first is kind of national security and sovereignty, and that's your intelligence, the Defense Department, Homeland Security. The second line of work is what I refer to as economic nationalism, and that is Wilbur Ross at Commerce, Steve Mnuchin at Treasury, Lighthizer at Trade, Peter Navarro, Stephen Miller, these people that are rethinking how we're going to reconstruct our trade arrangements around the world. The third, broadly, line of work is what is deconstruction of the administrative state.
That is Steve Bannon, the chief strategist for the White House yesterday at CPAC. Talking about the three buckets, one of which is national security and sovereignty as he defined it.
Coming out of the shadows.
That's right.
First time we've really seen him.
He didn't sound like Darth Vader. He's an actual human being. plenty nice and kind. He came to speak to the audience there. Speaking of somebody else who we are welcoming this morning is Marie Harf, who's a Fox News contributor and former State Department spokeswoman. Marie, thanks for being here this morning.
Hey, Marie. Hey, good morning.
So I don't know if you got a chance to see Steve Bannon yesterday or some of his remarks, but you know, at the State Department, you talked about foreign policy and national security every single day. He talked about a reorientation of national security and sovereignty. Is it a big change that this administration buckets sovereignty and defense of our borders and who comes and who doesn't into our country and lumps it into national security? And that's certainly a critique of the 8 years of the Obama administration, where they felt like it was more of an open border policy. Did you decouple those two as opposed to the way Trump looks at them right now?
Well, DHS obviously has the lead, along with the Border Patrol, for immigration. So immigration is one of those issues that really straddles domestic and foreign policy. If you look at what Secretary Tillerson was talking about in Mexico this week, a part of that was this new immigration policy. It wasn't as much of a foreign policy issue for the Obama administration as it was a law enforcement issue. And, you know, as a lot of Republicans have pointed out to me in the last few days, President Obama actually deported quite a large number of people as well.
2.5 million, and as you know, he was referred to as the deporter-in-chief. So when you see these headlines about Donald Trump, mass deportation is going to start tomorrow, which, in fact, Tillerson yesterday said there would be no mass deportation. But it does seem like the mainstream media has kind of ginned this up. And there's an atmosphere of fear we are reading, particularly out in Los Angeles, where people are afraid that there's going to be a knock at the door and somebody's going to say, okay, you're going home.
Well, I don't think it's just the media that's creating the fear. I was reading through the new guidance that DHS put out about how these implementation will go on these immigration orders. And I think the challenge now is the Trump administration, in trying to prioritize everyone that's here illegally. I mean, what really happens is you prioritize no one. It's putting people that have committed manslaughter.
There's still an echelon, though, right? I mean, they're still echeloning criminals before everyone.
The bad hombres are going first.
Before it was de facto you were here legally if you weren't at the top of the list. Now they're saying if you're illegal, you're illegal.
Well, I think if you've committed manslaughter, we should put more federal resources into deporting you than if you've maybe committed a traffic crime. And I don't think that we should be putting a lot of federal resources into taking mothers away from children. So there is some fear, I think, because this new executive order has pretty drastically expanded who a priority is for deportation. And just resource-wise, everyone can't be a priority because then no one is.
But where were these protests? Where was the anger all those years that President Obama was deporting? We have the numbers here, over 3 million people. And we've been talking about, yes, criminals, of course, but as part of that 3 million, Marie, there had to have been, I'm sure, mothers, some illegals here that did have incredibly heartbreaking stories that had to leave their families.
I didn't hear those stories.
We didn't hear those then. Well, why is that?
As someone who served in the administration, I can assure you we did hear a lot of criticism from advocates in the community who work on these issues. So we did hear some of that. But I think one of the reasons you hear a lot more concern now is the rhetoric that's being used. Secretary Tillerson and Kelly are saying a lot of the right things. The problem is when President Trump then refers to this as a military operation, that does sound scary and concerning to a lot of people. It certainly does to me.
Well, I think it was clarified later by Sean Spicer, who was using that as an adjective. Remember, he went to a military.
That's not exactly believable.
He went to a military school. He was talking about with military precision. But we're not going to argue with
that, right?
Well, it was listen, how many times during the Obama administration did somebody have to go out and clarify things? We're not bringing that up. But you did mention Rex Tillerson down in Mexico. We did see images of protests outside the embassy there. As it turns out, even though you might, in watching television, think, wow, look, the Mexican people are really steamed. Turns out that was a group, Democrats abroad, organized by the Democratic Party here in the United States.
I saw some of those reports, and I have no idea if how true those are, how many people were actually organized by Democrats abroad. But I think the bigger point, rather than those protests, is the fact that I've heard from a lot of people still in the administration that the Mexican government is pretty concerned about what's going on. And that's a relationship that needs to be a strong one. I think Tillerson and Kelly went down there as pretty much a cleanup operation for some of what President Trump has said. So it's hard for some of these countries who respond to something President Trump tweets. Then they hear from a cabinet secretary who maybe has a more reassuring message, and it's not really clear who they should believe or who's actually speaking for the president.
Yeah, and Mexico certainly has its own politics at play here as well. Marie, we're going to have you back on, and you're going to make your awesome pulled pork you were telling us about in the commercial
Cooking
break.
with friends.
Yeah, we love it.
I'm happy to. I'd love to.
Good to have you here this morning.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.